Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is youth awareness and support. And tonight it's actually part one because we're going to continue this conversation on next week. We have with us our co-host Jennifer Peterkin. We have with us Mark DARIA, who has an expertise in human trafficking, which we appreciate his knowledge so much for sharing with us. And we have with us SHELLY EDWARDS-JORGENSen, author of Beautiful Ashes. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text us at 437-778-3299. If you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, your faith community, or any local organizations, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Jen, I would ask if you would greet our listeners and viewers first on tonight.
Sure. Hello, Love Bay. So happy to be back on Suffering in Silence on Love Bay Afrobeats Music Talk Radio. My name is Jennifer Peterkin. I'm one of the co-hosts on Suffering in Silence. I am a domestic violence survivor and advocate. And I, through my advocacy work, alongside Tia as well, am on the board of Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. And I am also the host of the Human Experience podcast, which I created after, out of, I guess, an arm of my own advocacy. And it is a platform for storytelling and compassion, and how the experiences we go through shape who we are and who we become and how we see the world. And Tia and Shelly have both been guests on my podcast, so you can check their episodes out.
Thank you so much, Mark. If you could greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark DARIA. I've been on a couple of times before speaking about the issue of human trafficking. Looking forward to this evening and next week's conversation on this very important matter of helping people. That's what we're all here for. And just a tip of the hat to everyone here this evening, the listeners for being involved, and also for each of you for your advocacy.
Thank you. Shelly?
Hi, everyone. Just happy to be here again. I've talked about my story a couple times. I'm a survivor of domestic violence as well, but as a child. So this subject specifically is near and dear to my heart. I grew up with it, and I suffered a lot because of it. You're going to have to excuse me. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is crackly and take a few drinks. But I'm just happy to be here to join in this conversation and to be able to help anybody who is stuck. And I know as a youth, you really don't have a choice if you're part of domestic violence, because it's your parents usually. And so therefore you're stuck. So I understand that, and I'm here to be a voice to say that it's possible to survive this, and no matter what happens, and that there's people out here now at least advocating for you and looking to help you and give you resources, but don't be silent.
Thank you so much. So, Love Bay, I want to start off as usual sharing some resources, but I want to say again, this topic on tonight is about our youth awareness and support. So if you have some young people who you believe could benefit from this, we encourage you to grab them so they can hear, so they can listen, so they can see, or get this recording to them. after we record, after it's done, so they can see it and have the information. But we want to be as helpful as possible. As we talked about this and we kicked the idea around, and I made the final decision for it to just be us and not actually bring a young person onto the program. I I couldn't live with having a young person come on and have them open up and share their story, be it something they're dealing with now or something in the past, and me not be able to cover them and protect them from what could happen, because we know what it's like to share our stories, and I couldn't deal with that one. So we want to speak to young people. We're not speaking at you. We want to have a conversation, because we are all coming from a place of we know, we understand, we were that young person. So it's kind of like, what we would say to ourselves in that sense. So I want to share. These resources, and then we'll go right into the topic. First, I have the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. Their website is loveisrespect.org. Their phone number is 1-866-331-9474. We have the Polaris Project, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Their number is 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text the words "Be Free," BEFREE, to the number 233733. And their website is polarisproject.org. We have the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect. This was formerly the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. Now it is called the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect. Their website is pcar.org. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which is also known as RAINN. Their website is RAINN, RAINN.org. And Mark shared some other wonderful resources with us that I wanted to get out. And this is not all of them, but just a few. There is Street Light USA. Their website is streetlightusa.org. Their number is 623-435-0900, and you want extension 8116. The Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit, and this information is in the United States, the U.S. In the United States, the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit. Their website is www.justice.gov/CRT/human-trafficking-unit-HTPU. Their phone number for civil rights is 202-514-3847. Also, Amnesty International, their website is amnestyusa.org. In the New Jersey area, the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, their website is njhumantrafficking.org. And the last resource that I wanted to share from this wonderful list, an institute to address commercial sexual exploitation. This is a law institute in Villanova that works to help with the victims of sex trafficking. For the Villanova Law Institute, you can contact Shay M. Rhodes Esquire, who is the director of this program. The number is 610-519-7183. And the email address is Shay, SHEA RHODES @law.villanova.edu. And you can also reach Professor Michelle Dempsey, who's a faculty advisor. Her number is 610-519-8011. And her email address is Dempsey, DEMPSEY, at law.villanova.edu. So this information, in fact, could save someone's life. So we take the time to share the resources because these resources can make the difference of life and death to some individuals. So again, we move into our topic on tonight with this, which is youth awareness and support. And as I said before, this really is a conversation, or very much of what would you say to yourself at that age moment. And again, we're not talking at you, we're talking to you. There are some things that, you know, we experience as young people. We don't know what to name it, we don't know what to call it, we don't know what it is. And it's not until you come of age and until you start living life that you understand it was abused. I was abused. I was physically abused. I was sexually abused. I was manipulated. And sometimes the acts can happen and we don't have the words to put to it until much later. There are some adults that don't understand what they're going through or what has happened to them. And so I want to start just with that statement, just very, very simply. And Mark, I'll ask you first, what would you say to yourself, you know, at a young age? If 14, 15-year-old Mark was sitting in front of you, having faced some of the things you faced in your life, what would you say to him to help forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the at the crux of the whole thing, and I know all of you will agree with me, is that the feeling of being alone, that I have, that this is happening only to me. My friends don't understand this. No one else is going through this. And in some convoluted way that, I'm to blame for it. I brought it on myself, or I allowed this to happen, and I'm the center of it. And nothing is further from the truth. Children are God's gift. They are put on earth for our protection. We're to be their guides and their shepherds. And nothing is worse than the exploitation of that innocence and the destruction of that innocence. And we have to find a way to get through that. And one of those ways is this. And again, I started out by saying I tip my hat. I have not suffered the kinds of exploitation that all three of you have mentioned, but I've gone through my own stuff and psychological and whatnot, and it is very difficult. And it took years before I was actually able to speak to a friend of mine. And when he said, no, there's no way, that kind of, emotional and psychological stuff could be going on, I immediately brushed him off and said, yeah, you're right, forget about it. And he went home and told his parents. And his father came and got me and had a long talk with me and basically adopted me. And my life would look very different if it hadn't been for two families growing up. That changed, and it was never physical abuse or sexual abuse or anything, but I think that the takeaway on all that, without going on too long, I think the takeaway is that the understanding that first, we're not at the center of this, that it is the parent or parents or the adult or the whoever it is, the perpetrator is the one who bears the responsibility for that, and that has to be laying at their door. Legally as well, but certainly on all other counts. And that the second part is that there is a light at the end of that tunnel, that there is a positive aspect to this, if there can be a positive aspect in all this. That is to help others who are going through this and to let them know that they are not suffering alone, that they are not alone in all of this, that they have advocates, they have people who understand this and can associate with this and can help them toward a better life and a full life. That would be my message.
So I thank you so much for how you started, because I think you made an awesome point. You haven't experienced what the three of us have experienced. And even though the three of us, we can say we experienced abuse, it was still different because we're different people and our situations were different. But I think you made an awesome point about the psychological issues, because that's just as important. There are some youth going into school, even on the college level. They're not physically abused, but they're having a hard time mentally.
Mhm.
And our youth today need to know that's okay. It's okay if you just don't feel good inside and you can't explain it. It's okay, whatever you're thinking and feeling. If it's a deep depression, if it's anger, if you just feel off, it's okay that you feel that way, and it's okay for you to speak up. So one point, just following up on what Mark said, we want you to know and understand abuse doesn't have to be physical. It can be mental, it can be emotional, and it hurts just as much. And I would dare to say that it's more damaging, because eventually you heal physically. The mental and emotional wounds and scars go forward. And today we have 40, 50, 60-year-old women and men dealing with mental and emotional scars from when they were 8 and 5 and 13 and 14. So psychological issues are just as important. So I thank you so much for making that point and for sharing that and bringing it up. I remember being in high school, um, and one of it was an English teacher, and she talked about a student that she had, and she said you could look at her and see that something was wrong because she wore black clothes, she had earrings all on her face, she wore black makeup. It was like she was trying to purposely exude this darkness, but something was wrong on the inside. She was trying to show you on the outside. She was trying to show you. She didn't say it, but just her demeanor. So I mean, it comes out different ways, different students, different children, but it's just as important.
And,
So
and if I could just jump in there on that too, I'm sorry, I don't want to hog the time. I'll shut up. But empathy is, because I think something like that, the young lady that you're citing, it's so easy to look at that person and say, oh, she's a weirdo, and ostracize her from the group. I don't want to get to know her. And what a tragedy. Because that's exactly the opposite of what she needs. She needs to be brought in and incorporated and understood, and find friendship and find love and find that there are things worth living for. So I'm sorry, that just resonates so loudly with me. I had to jump in. Sorry.
absolutely. And so Shelly, I would go to you next with the same question. What would you say to 14, 15, 16-year-old Shelly?
Well, I think I want to start where Mark did, is the emotional and the psychological thing. Especially if you grow up in a abusive home. Number one, the emotional and psychological abuse is worse, because it's what you adjusts the formation of your own self-worth. And so, like, for me, I was born into domestic violence, extreme domestic violence, to where my mother was murdered when I was 15, and by my dad, and he burned the house down. So that's where it ended up for. So my whole life I experienced this, because my parents were married for 10 years, and it had started long before that, before I was even born. And so I didn't even have, essentially, the first 7 years of any child's life is really about learning just how to function. Science. I think it was Dr. Lipton. I can't remember, but essentially you are programming your subconscious of how to even function for the first 7 years of your life. So if you're being trained in a way that isn't a healthy pattern, you don't know it. You don't even know that that's your thought pattern. That's not right, because you have nothing to base it on. And so for me, for a very long time, number one, I knew I was keeping secrets, and I knew that there was things, because that's what I was trained to do, is to keep that a secret. So I was conditioned to not talk about abuse. And so not only was I conditioned to not talk about it, so then there's this element of shame, that if you do talk about it, there's shame and it reflects on you. And it's this whole pea soup of dysfunction that you're establishing your foundation as a child and your thought patterns, and naturally children, everything's centered about them. It's I think it was Freud that says, everything's about you. Well, so your parents are fighting, even if you're not involved, it's about you, because you're a child. And that's the natural development of children. And so when your foundation is just jacked from the beginning, it sets you up for failure in so many different things. And so, but fundamentally, you're riddled with, I'm not lovable. I have things to be ashamed of. I have to keep abuse secret, but yet you don't even recognize that it's really abuse. And what's too much? Is it too much that to be being strangled because the police weren't called for that? What's too much? Where is the line? You have no barometer, so you don't even know where to draw the line of what's abuse and what's normal. And then as you start getting older, by the time you're a teenager or even middle school, and you start figuring out, well, crap, this is not happening in everybody else's family. But you already have all these dysfunctional thought patterns and this low self-esteem and this problem, and it sets you up to be victimized by other people and fall into the same traps. And none of it is your fault. Like Mark said, you don't own that shame. That's somebody else's shame. You don't own that. But telling yourself that it is one thing, or having somebody tell you that and believing it are completely different.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, as children, I mean, they set the drinking age at 21 because they thought that was when your fully formed adult brain actually developed. But what they've found now, it's 25. Mm-hmm. So essentially, until you're 25, you don't even have a fully functioning problem-solving brain to mitigate any of this. So if I was talking to my teenage self, where I found myself fending for myself and all of these things are being victimized, and it's don't keep your mouth shut. Number one, you're not alone. I have had so many people since I wrote my book say, Shelley, I wanted to be you. Like I was one of the top female athletes in my class. I was one of the top smartest kids in my class. I'm an engineer by trade, and I varsityed as a freshman in softball. So on the outside, I had this white picket fence. I mean, the last family vacation we went on was Europe. So on the outside, everyone assumed that my life was like ideal, and that's a false assumption too. Is you don't know. And I guarantee you're not alone. And unfortunately, what Mark is talking about is happening way more than you even think it's happening. You have so many more friends that are being sexually abused or just abused physically or emotionally that you probably can't even count them. So it's actually the opposite of being alone. Almost everybody's going to have some sort of level of understanding, but it's that isolation where you feel like you're alone and then you have this shame. So don't be ashamed. Tia gave you a list of resources. Reach out to people. If you're in a situation where there is any kind of harm, physical, that is a showstopper. No one should be laying a hand on you in any way. And that should be reported to somebody that can help you. And talk to your friends. Don't allow yourself to be ashamed of things home. And if you need to, join a Facebook group for domestic violence and talk. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people on these groups. Heck, if you guys want to reach out to me, my email is beautifulashesmemoir@gmail.com. Gmail me and I will talk to you, or follow me on social media and I will talk to you if you need some advice. But don't not talk. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. So Jen, same question.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Shelly, I'm very familiar with your story, obviously, having heard it a couple of times, and it's remarkable. And it's so extreme. And so but I like how you kind of put that at the forefront, that it is extreme, but there's a spectrum and none of it's okay. And so to be vocal and to talk, I would say that I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you were in terms of the fully formed problem solving area of our brains not being all there until we're 25. And so what I have to say to that is sort of, and I don't mean this in any sort of condescending way towards younger people, but you don't know what you don't know. And when you are young, that young, your world is extremely small by design. You don't have life experience. So you aren't necessarily, I would say, maybe quote unquote street smart yet. But what you do have is your gut and your intuition, and it is very telling. It's something that I have been exploring a lot over the past several years, and something I've recently began talking about as well, is that our intuition is so spot on. So when you feel like something is off, when you feel like maybe this isn't right, and you don't have any other information, but it doesn't make you feel good, there is something about it that makes you feel like it's throwing flares up in your brain, take that seriously. It is serious. Your gut can be a really great indicator of where you are at. And it may not be like you're the highest authority, but I have found that if you take the time to take a step back and listen to what your gut is telling you, listen to, just maybe pause, that it can be very helpful in kind of navigating situations like that, especially because, we all have a fear response, and there's multiple ways that we can respond to fear. Fight, flight, or freeze are the most common, right? And we don't necessarily know what our response is until we're put into a situation where we are in active fear. But I truly believe our intuition is a big part of that. And so, or our gut feeling, whatever you want to call it. So follow that take that seriously. Don't brush it off as you being over dramatic, because 9 times out of 10, there is something there that you're picking up on, whether it's your subconscious or whatever. And then the other thing I would say is boundaries. We talk about boundaries all the time on the show. It's one of our favorite words. But specifically, we can only know what we are taught. And a lot of us, our parents, did not have great boundaries, and their parents did not have great boundaries. And so when you have something generational like that, behaviors passed down over and over again, and you have people that aren't really thinking anything of it. This is just life. This is just how things are. It becomes very easy to normalize behaviors that can be really dysfunctional and really toxic. So just because it's something that existed in your household doesn't mean that it's appropriate or that it's right. And again, I would caution your intuition or your instinct. Therapy is a great resource for figuring out how to draw boundaries and how to keep boundaries. But I will say personally, I know that I allowed things to happen to me because I thought that I had to, because that was behavior that I grew up with. And it wasn't until later, after I was out of my situation and in therapy, that I realized that I didn't actually have to allow those things to happen. And I did have the power to say no. And it honestly never even occurred to me. And so I think, there's a lot of grace there for our parents also don't know, or whoever raised us also don't know what they don't know. But you can be a cycle breaker, and you can be a generational cycle breaker, generational bondage breaker, by standing in the gap and saying, I'm drawing this boundary. Just because you say this behavior is appropriate doesn't mean it is. And it doesn't serve me well. It doesn't, it's not good for me. It's toxic. It's dysfunctional, whatever the behavior is. And whether that's family, friends, romantic relationships, whatever it is, being able to draw and hold boundaries is an incredible skill, that will serve you for the rest of your life. And so if you can start stretching that muscle when you're young, you will go very far.
Absolutely. And just what you were saying about trusting your intuition, that gut feeling. If your gut feeling is telling you, if your gut feeling is causing you to feel fear, then pay attention to it. And I want to say, it's okay to feel afraid. It's okay to be afraid. But just like Mark and Shelly and Jen have already said, don't stay silent. So you can be afraid, and it's absolutely understandable, but you still have to take a move forward to do something to help yourself. So someone will know about this to be able to help you. So in your fear, take advantage of whatever information is in front of you. So there are websites that we've already given out. There's more information that you can Google. You can look up online. You can go to a library and research. You can go to your school counselor. If there's a particular teacher that you have a relationship with, speak to your teacher. You can speak to the parents of one of your friends. There is an avenue that you can take. Definitely call the police if you are in immediate physical danger. But sometimes you might have to think outside the box. If you're going to a doctor's appointment, speak to your doctor when you have that space alone with your doctor, or a nurse. I tell individuals, I tell adults, if you need to stop a police officer on the street, if you walk past a fire station, walk in there and say, I need help, and tell them what you need. Whatever it is that you're thinking and you're feeling, it's okay. But you do need to put some action behind that, even though it'd be fearful. And I wanted to point out that fear, the combination of fear and keeping somebody else's secret and it's a secret of somebody else hurting you, keeping that inside, it definitely will make your situation or your circumstances appear to be worse than what they are, or it would magnify in your mind that I'm by myself. As Mark said when he started, you may feel alone, because that's what that fear and holding on to a secret will do to you. But as we are all saying, at some point, you do have to open up. You have to speak to somebody. Um, it, it's really hard, but it's like help in some situations won't come if you don't say anything, because those looking on the outside don't know. They may feel like I'm looking at the brightest student in the school. They may feel like I'm looking at the star athlete, so everything in their home is fine. Like Shelly's story. They may feel like this student right here can choose whichever Ivy League college they want to go to. So they're not thinking maybe I need to sit and spend a few more extra minutes with him or with her. So sometimes you have to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. I need to talk. Or again, if it's not physical abuse, if it's not a sexual abuse, if it's just mental, emotional, maybe it's not somebody doing something to you, but I just don't feel right. I don't like the way that I'm thinking. I don't like my thoughts. You have to open up and speak about it. And it's okay to do that. And I want to just add to a little bit of what Shelly and Mark said earlier. It's not your fault. It's really not. And so there are some things as a teenager, as a young person, that I could not see, that as an adult, I can point it out immediately. And one of those things is that perpetrators are smart. Abusers are smart. They choose their victims, and some of them take some very good time of choosing. They put some effort into it. They study their victim at some points. That's what some people do. So there's a manipulation there that you're not even aware of.
They're predators is what they are.
Yes.
It's just like a lion knows which gazelle they're going to catch.
Exactly.
And so, if you ever heard the phrase that person, sorry Tia, I'm jumping in, but that person has a good vibe. We do resonate a certain frequency, and I'm not going to get into the science of that, but you can kind of, again, it's that gut that Jen was talking about, but you have to practice using that gut, which means you got to put down these and turn off Netflix and spend some time in meditation. And I'm not talking, kind of thing, but just quiet time with introspective thoughts of your own to get in tune with your own gut. But that gut can save you. And but we do give off a certain vibe as being victims of this. And that's why you can see a pattern where most people will fall into abusive relationships if they grew up in abusive relationships. I'm an anomaly. I'm the exception to that rule. And so the other thing that I'm sitting here like screaming in my head that I keep wanting to jump in is sometimes it's scary to think, oh, well, I don't want to get this person in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so, you might not be strong enough or confident enough to call the police in a situation that you probably should be calling the police. But start talking about little things with your friends. Figure out which friends can be your confidant that, number one, aren't going to talk about it behind your back, because that's a common thing in kids. So it's really better to try to find an adult in your life that you feel comfortable with. It could be your hairdresser. but get used to talking and talking about what's happening, just so you have a sounding board about what is acceptable, because you don't know what good boundaries are. I can tell you that right now, because if you are in an environment where there's abuse, your parent, like Jen and Tia have said, your parents didn't know how to set good boundaries, and so you're not going to know, and so that's why it's so important to talk. But maybe it's not jumping right to a police. It's finding somebody that you're safe and comfortable with, just to hear you. And before there's any action, because you don't have to take action until you're ready to take action, because it's not a one-time event. That's the thing that they tell you. Oh, I'm so sorry, this will never happen again. That's bullshit. So I'm just putting it out there. Don't believe that lie. And maybe once you can believe it once, but the second time you're hearing that same story, no, red flag, boom. It doesn't matter what relationship you're in. So anyway, I sidebarred you, Tia.
No, absolutely. But this is what we wanted to do on tonight. We wanted to put our thoughts, our experiences, our information out there to be able to help or guide, some young person. And I would say not even just young people, but I would say to that 40, that 50-year-old, that 60-year-old that is still struggling with the issues from your childhood because you didn't deal with it. I would say that this is for you as well, because an act, a moment, or what was done to you does not have to define who you are. So even if you are an adult, it does not have to define you, but you have to make a choice. And so, Mark, I would ask you to expound on that, because you made a choice. Now you opened up, you told a friend, and they were like, it's nothing, and you left it at that. But when that parent came to you, you made a choice. You could have said, well, it's okay.
He didn't give me a choice.
Well, that was a good parent. That's a good parent.
He told me to get down to his house and get into a bed, and I was sleeping on a friend's porch.
Well, that was.
And I was because my home situation was just upside down, and it wasn't positive. And I had mentioned this to my best friend. He's passed now, but and he was looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I was, "Yeah, taking showers up at the high school in the morning, and I haven't been home in 2 weeks, and it's just." And 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, his father slaps me on the head. I'm asleep, and he just and tough love. But it actually does speak to something, a couple of directions, and one is that gut that we're all talking about here. Trust the gut. Now, I sometimes get nervous when people trust the gut, because I don't always think guts are right. But in circumstances where people have experienced something tragic, they can recognize it in someone else. And that's and I would make that akin to the concept of situational awareness. Pay attention to your surroundings. Look at what's going on around you. These people do stand out. They're us, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So we can recognize ourselves in them, and vice versa. And so, the world is different today. And being the only man on the panel here this evening, I've got to raise my hand and say it's extremely difficult for a man to ask for help. Mm-hmm. We've got to always be in charge. Men and women, I know it goes against conventional wisdom today. We're built different. Men have a very hard time. You see this with veterans. They're the group that are the least likely to ask for help. And they've done the most to defend the country and to keep us all safe. And that's why so many of them are living on the streets today, because they can't raise their hand. And there's a tragic aspect to that, because we have to, everyone needs help. Everyone at some point in our lives, everyone has to raise their hand and ask for help. And so we have to get ourselves comfortable with that. And I started out by saying, I do believe that the generations have changed. We're not our parents, we're not our grandparents, we're not our great grandparents. Where I do think that kind of Archie Bunker, pull them up by their bootstraps, if you starve in tough luck, go get a job. That kind of mentality is breaking down in a good way and in a bad way too, but in a good way overall. People need help. We should help those that need help. There's nothing wrong with that. But then we've got the predators that are out there who know how to manipulate circumstances, situations, agencies, and we've got to. And I loved Shelly's point. The old adage: "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." And I incorporated that very early into my life. I will give anyone an opportunity to do me once. I'm going to look at you and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I don't care what has happened before. I'm going to give you one shot. But once you've done that, you're going to have a real hard time digging out of that hole. And I'm going to be honest, just my personality type, very few people ever do. There have been some, but you ever do. And it works for me. And I do think that there is that aspect. We have to be able to focus, to surround ourselves. And I think that's a key point we should delve into a little bit more. We have to surround ourselves, not just tap into the one person or one agency that's going to help us, because they're not always going to be there. We have to start to jettison the refuse in our lives. What's bad for us is going to stay bad, because most people don't reform. And if we're lucky, if we're the ones that can get out from underneath, but we're never going to get out from underneath if we don't get rid of the refuse around us and start to surround ourselves with the people we want to be, the people we emulate, the people we want to be like. What is it that they have in their life that and I don't mean materially, I mean relationship wise. What kind of relationships do I want to find myself in? Honest ones, people who I can depend on, people who can depend on me, et cetera, et cetera. Create your own list, tailor-made for each of us.
Yes. So I want to emphasize again, and I thank you all so much for everything that you've already shared. Now I want to emphasize, and then Jen, I'm going to ask you to, I don't know, you might have to clarify this for me or something, just add to it. But I want to emphasize getting help. Getting help is extremely important. So that means opening up in some kind of way. Maybe even if you just write a note and hand it to a teacher, whatever way is most comfortable for you, do what you need to do to break your silence, to get help. But I want to say, and young people may have a bit of difficulty with this, but you don't want to eventually become an abuser because you didn't handle your pain the right way. That once you have been hurt, once you have experienced trauma, be it mental, physical, emotional, once you've been hurt and opened up in that way, there is a healing process that has to take place. And if your heart, if your mind, if you don't heal in the right way, you can go one of two ways. You can live your life and you can be okay, or you can live your life and do what was done to you. And sometimes we can do what was done to us and we don't even know it. Subconsciously, we're just not even thinking. Like you're yelling and screaming like your parents did, and you don't even know why. You're just mean, and you don't know why. You don't even recognize it. And so there's an adage: hurt people. And so I want to try to emphasize that, Jen, to young people. You have to handle your pain, get help, and move along your process the right way, because you don't want to end up being like the person who hurt you. It's like if a parent hurts a child and then that child turns around and gives that anger and that energy to a younger sibling. You want to break the cycle. So I know that was a lot, Jen, but you think you could?
No, you did great. That was perfect. No, I absolutely agree. I think that it's so hard because restorative work and healing work is so difficult because it takes so long. And so when we say like you have to heal or like start going to therapy, start your healing journey, like please rest in the knowledge that we know how big of a deal that is. We know how difficult that is. And we know that it doesn't end either. I mean, truly, once you start down this road of introspection, it doesn't fully ever stop. I mean, you will never arrive as a person. And so, however you find that healing, I think it can be multiple paths. I think that doesn't have to be one thing that you do, but it is important that you process what you've been through and you build healthy coping mechanisms and your boundaries so that you don't become a different version um, of what hurt you. And I've seen this play out in real life. And I will say that my abuser was a very hurt person that never healed from his abuser. And that is never an excuse. But I understand that now, having gone through my own healing work. And so there's a big part of me that feels, I guess, sympathy for him because he's stuck in a way. And that's what happens when we don't heal. We become stuck in it, kind of like playing this situation over and over and over in our heads, and we can never truly move forward. So there's a lot of different avenues for healing. There's all different modalities of therapy. Talk therapy isn't the only thing out there. So, just so you know, because it doesn't work for everybody. So there are other things out there that can help. And like Shelly said before, introspection, it's a huge, huge part of, I think, growing in yourself in general, but especially when you're doing healing work, really listening to your body, listening to your own headspace and getting comfortable there and kind of just resting in the knowledge of who you are and who you have become as a wonderfully made whole human being.
Yes. And so, Jen, I just want to add what you said. There are different ways that we respond to therapy. There are different types of therapy. So with that, it brought to mind, you can contact any of these agencies that can help you deal with domestic violence, sexual assault, mental health awareness issues. You can actually chat online if because I know that's a newer thing, the chatting and the texting. So that's a platform that you can use. If you don't want to speak to someone on the phone, if you feel better chatting, you can do that. If you feel better texting, you can do that. Once you come into contact with a resource that can help you, maybe you can use email to go back and forth. As long as whatever platform you're using has to be safe, make sure that it's safe in the communication that you're having. When you get to that point and you know it's safe and you're okay, then you can go forward from there. I will say, once you a counseling setting, therapy is not going to go over well with a young person in email. That's not going to happen. But you can start having those conversations and talking. You can start with chats and you can start with text and then see where that goes. And we're just under the hour, and we are going to continue this conversation on next week. But I want to ask all of you, I want to ask Shelly, you first, and then Mark and Jen, you can close us out. Your final thought to our young people on this evening. And again, not just our young people, but our adults who are still struggling with the issues in their young life. Just a final word to them on tonight.
Well, I'm just grateful that Jen said that, you know, there's more than just talk therapy. It's therapy. There's so many different modalities. Don't stop until you find what works for you. And I know if you're strapped for resources, there's books that you can read. I did talk therapy on and off for 15 years and was still miserable. It wasn't until I found some of these other modalities like EMDR, NET, which is neuro-emotional technique, cranial sacral work, Reiki, neurofeedback. All of these are different modalities that do work. NET was the thing that worked best for me, but now they all work for me because I've accomplished quite so much healing, and it is a lifelong journey. It's long and it's arduous. However, when you start off with a bucket with holes in the bottom, it doesn't matter how much you keep filling that bucket up to try to feel love and peace and happiness. If there's holes in the bottom, which when you're in these situations, there's holes in the bottom of your bucket, you're going to spend all your energy just trying to fill that bucket up, and it's just going to be draining out. So you have to find a place to stop filling the bucket and fix the holes, and then you can fill the bucket. And it's possible to do, but you need to start. You need to decide when you want to do that, and know that it's a roller coaster ride and it's long, but it's worth the effort, and it's life changing. And hurt people do hurt people. Anybody who's abusing anybody has been abused themselves. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's an addict was probably has trauma. 99% of all addiction is the root cause is trauma. And so you're setting yourself up without taking steps to get help to become an addict in some way. And so these are all the things that you can start to try to avoid in your life. And it's possible. I believe in you. I know I don't know you, but I do believe in you, and you can do this. You are a child of God. You are loved, and whether you're feeling it directly with the people that are in your life, you are loved and you're cared for and you're important.
Thank you. Mark?
Just a lot of thoughts going on. I am thinking particularly, and I guess I'll share it because it's so prevalent on my mind right now. A young lady years ago I was helping who was an abuse victim. She was sexually abused by her father, who I came to find out was abused by his father. And you know, I was thinking, you know, when she has children, she's not going to be a good parent. She was just in so many places that were so bad. And I remember as a kid, you know, the Bible says, you know, the sins of the father to the son for 7 generations. And I remember as a kid thinking, well, that's really unfair because I didn't do anything from 6 generations back. Do something to him, you know, don't do me. And I remember it wasn't until that night I was sitting with her, talking to her, and I realized that's not what God was talking about. He's saying it's taking 7 generations to work this crap out of your life. So to bring that point full circle, and this isn't fashionable either because it sounds hard, and I'm totally sympathetic to what Jennifer's saying, but we have 2 choices, and it always doesn't seem like that, but we can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. And it's I know that sounds black and white and it sounds easy, and it's not. It's anything but. I totally get it. It's a lifetime of commitment to doing the right thing. but that's the journey we need to take.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to be of any use to anyone else around us, we have to have our own house in order. And the best example we can do is prove that because we've made it through, so can you. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to focus on, and that's the kind of message we need to be conveying. So that's where I would put it.
Thank you so much. And Jen?
Yeah, I guess I would just end on life, God willing, is long enough for you for this to not be your end, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You have time to be who you want to be, to figure it out, to do the work, to heal, to make the change. It's difficult. Mark's absolutely right. It is a commitment. It is showing up. It looks like failure sometimes, and that's okay. But you have the time to do it. You have the space to do it. You can do it, and life is long enough that you will be able to look back. If you start on this journey, you will be able to look back and realize how different, how far you've come, and how different your life is.
Absolutely. My 25-year-old just turned 25 a few days ago, and she said to me, "I'm old." She said, "I'm a quarter century." I'm like, oh my God, you I'm like, go sit down. But as everyone has said, Shelly, Mark, and Jennifer, this is a life journey. If you've experienced trauma, if you've experienced mental health issues, and you're trying to figure out how to start your healing journey, or you are on a healing journey, if you're coming out of a cloud of a secret being over you, or you're trying to plan and figure out who can I trust to come out of it, all of this is a lifelong journey. And we don't want you to go away tonight being afraid, but we want you to go away with an understanding. That's becoming an adult. That's what it is. That's living your life a little bit at a time. And when you look back, the journey doesn't end. You keep going. You just get to decide which way you're going to go, and you get to decide how you're going to go. And I think an easy example to give would be taking care of a car. No matter what kind of car you have to put gas in it. You need oil changes. You need tune-ups. You sometimes, if you get a side swipe or whatever, call an insurance company. You get this fixed. You hope that it goes really quickly and easy, but you take care of it. You don't wait until your car breaks down to call a mechanic. You do upkeep. And so that's the same. We have to do upkeep on ourselves, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're falling apart. It means I'm taking care of myself. You can be in a good place, but you still need to take care of yourself. So you can either remain in that good place, or go from a good place to a better place. If you're in a bad place, you want to move from a bad place to a good place. And it doesn't happen overnight. Nothing happens overnight. Yeah. I guarantee if anything is bothering you on this evening, it did not happen overnight, and it's not going to just disappear and go away overnight. But it's okay. That's a part of the lifelong journey. And so I want to thank you all for being here on tonight. I really, really hope that tonight was helpful. I hope when this is replayed on next week that it's helpful. When you share it, I hope that it's helpful. And when we come back to finish this conversation on next Friday, I want to continue to be helpful for our young people, because we can't keep letting them go through middle school and high school and get to college and break down. It's like there are some professors who can't be professors because they're counselors, right? Same in high school, same in middle school. Like, I would love for our kids to be able to go to school and actually just pull out a book and pen and learn. But there's some life stuff. So I hope we were able to help a little bit. If you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. And thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia on Left Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together, and we want you all to have a good evening. Thank you.